The universe, in all its vast, uncaring glory, had never prepared us for humans. Report status, Navigator Voxtral. I barked, my 6 appendages gripping the command console as our flagship trembled under another barrage. Not good, Commander Jiraal. Voxtral's voice wavered, the membrane beneath his cranial ridges flushing a panic purple. The Drekari Armada has breached our 3rd defensive ring. 17 more colony vessels lost in the last quarter rotation. I suppressed a hiss of frustration. 3 standard cycles of retreat, and still the Drekari pursued us through the void, harvesting our people like nutrient crops. Fortanian Collective, once spanning 27 star systems, now reduced to a pitiful refugee fleet lurching toward unexplored space. Tell me something I don't already know, Navigator, I snapped. Like perhaps a solution that doesn't end with our species being processed in a Drekari food paste. Voxtral's upper eyes blinked nervously. The tactical computer suggests our survival probability has dropped to 7.2%, Commander. Wonderful. I will inform a matriarchy we are only mostly doomed. I replied, mandibles clicking with bitter amusement. Any other delightful observations? First Officer Nexlara approached, her exoskeleton gleaming under the emergency lights. Commander, long-range sensors have detected an unusual energy signature at coordinates 4728.11. It doesn't match any known Drekari configuration. Meaning what exactly? Meaning something's out there, watching our annihilation with great interest. She tilted her head. What if we approach them? Any potential ally is better than certain extinction. I considered the suggestion, antennae twitching. The Cortanian Collective had encountered 14 sentient species in our history. 12 had tried to conquer us. 1 had immediately self-destructed rather than engage in diplomacy. The last, the accursed Drekari, were currently turning our people into nutrient slurry. The Supreme Matriarch would never approve contact with an unknown species, I said. The Supreme Matriarch isn't here, Nexlara countered, her voice dropping to a whisper. She's on evacuation vessel Delta 9, halfway to the Galactic Rim by now. Before I could reprimand her for such treasonous truth, the bridge shuddered violently. Emergency klaxons blared as crew members were thrown from their stations. The lighting flickered, then stabilized to a dim red glow. Direct hit to engines 3 and 4, reported Defense Specialist Zurthal. Shield integrity at 31% and falling. Another blast rocked the ship. I watched in horror as the tactical display showed 3 Drekari destroyers breaking formation, accelerating toward our most vulnerable evacuation transports, each carrying thousands of hibernating Cortanian younglings. They are targeting the nursery ships, I whispered, feeling my heart constrict. For 8 generations, the Cortanian Collective had prided itself on logical decision-making. Emotion was inefficient. Sentiment was weakness. But watching those blinking lights, each representing carriers of our genetic future, something primitive and desperate clawed through my carefully cultivated rationality. Navigator, plot an intercept course to that unknown energy signature, I ordered. Maximum emergency thrust. Voxtral's membranes flickered with shock. Commander, that's against 18 different collective protocols, and extinction violates all of them, I interrupted. Execute the order. The ship lurched as our remaining engines strained against physics itself. Behind us, the Drekari adjusted their course, apparently puzzled by our sudden directional change, but no less determined to eradicate us. Broadcast on all frequencies. I instructed communications officer Prelzin. Unknown vessel. This is Commander Jiraal of the Cortanian Collective. Our civilization faces extinction. We request immediate assistance. Repeat, immediate assistance required. For 37 excruciating seconds, only static answered. Then, this is Captain Alessandro Blackburn of the United Earth Alliance vessel Relentless. The voice sounded oddly flat, lacking the harmonic resonances of proper communication. Stand by for visual transmission. The main view screen flickered, and collective gasps echoed across the bridge. The creature was disturbing. Bipedal, with exposed facial features uncovered by protective chitin. No visible secondary limbs or defensive appendages. Its skin appeared soft, vulnerable, lacking any natural armor. Two small eyes, a protruding nasal sensory organ, and a lipid-sealed mouth opening completed the bizarre arrangement. How had such defenseless organisms achieved spaceflight? Your situation looks complicated, the human said, its mouth forming what I would later learn was called a smirk. We are being systematically exterminated, I replied, struggling to maintain composure. Complicated seems an inadequate description. The human made a sharp exhalation sound, a laugh. I would discover, and lean forward. Fair enough, Commander. We have been monitoring the Drekari for some time. Nasty customers. Didn't realize they had you folks on Iran. You know the Drekari. Nexlara asked, mandibles agape. We have had some encounters, Captain Blackburn said vaguely. Look, I'm authorized to offer humanitarian assistance, but direct military intervention requires approval from higher up. Another explosion rocked our vessel. 3 more evacuation ships winked out of existence on our tactical display. We don't have time for your bureaucratic processes, I shouted, abandoning all diplomatic pretense. 12 billion of my species have already perished. Our younglings are being harvested for sustenance. The human's expression changed subtly. Something cold and predatory flickered behind those small eyes. Put me through to your fleet command, Captain Blackburn said quietly. Within moments, we had established a multi-ship communication link. The human listened as 3 different Quartanian commanders desperately reported their situations. Breached on multiple decks, life support failing in sectors 7 through youngling carriers surrounded. Captain Blackburn held up a hand appendage. I have heard enough. Stand by. The view screen split to show a second human, this one adorned with different markings on its uniform coverings. Admiral Wilson, requesting immediate combat authorization, said Blackburn without preamble. We have had a genocide in progress. The second human's face hardened. Rules of engagement. They are harvesting children for food, sir. A moment of silence. Authorization granted. Blackburn, you have operational command of Battle Group 7. Rules of engagement unrestricted. Something that looked disturbingly like satisfaction crossed Captain Blackburn's features. Understood, Admiral. Blackburn out. The captain turned back to us. Commander Jiraal, move your vulnerable ships behind our formation. We will handle the Drekari. You will handle them, I repeated incredulously. The Drekari Armada consists of 43 capital ships and over 200 support vessels. Your single ship cannot possibly Battle Group 7, decloak and assume combat formation, Blackburn interrupted, touching controls on a panel out of view. The sensor display erupted with new contacts as 15 warships materialized around us, seemingly from empty space itself. Their energy signatures dwarfed anything in our fleet or the Drekari's. Impossible whisperer de Voxtrad. No species possesses functional invisibility technology. We call it active camouflage, Blackburn said with another of those unsettling mouth expressions. Been watching your little conflict for a while now. Just needed proper authorization to intervene. I felt a cold sensation in my abdominal cavity. You have been observing our extinction. For research purposes? More like strategic assessment, the human replied casually. The galaxy is a dangerous neighborhood. We like to know who's moving in next door. Before I could process the implications, Blackburn began issuing orders to his fleet with terrifying efficiency. Cruisers Indomitable and Vengeance take point. Destroyers form perimeter defense around the Quartanian nursery ships. Carriers launch all fighters. Target priority is Drekari harvesters first, then command vessels. The view screen shifted to an external view, and for the first time, I beheld the full terror of human warships. Unlike the elegant, crystalline geometries of Quartanian vessels or the organic, flowing designs of Drekari bioships, human vessels were brutal, angular constructions of metal and composite materials. They bristled with weapon emplacements, their hulls scarred with what appeared to be previous battle damage, hastily repaired. "Commander," Nexlara whispered beside me, "these vessels show evidence of extensive combat experience." I nodded slowly, a growing realization sending shivers through my exoskeleton. We hadn't found peaceful saviors. We had awakened something far more dangerous than even the Drekari. We had found predators. The first volley from the human ships cut through space with mathematical precision. 3 Drekari destroyers erupted into superheated plasma before they could even adjust their defensive fields. The humans had somehow calculated the exact resonance frequencies of Drekari shields and simply ignored them. "All ships, engage at will," ordered Blackburn, his voice utterly calm as destruction unfolded. "Show them what happens when you hunt in human territory." What followed was not a battle. It was an execution. Human fighters, tiny, nimble crafts piloted by actual organic beings rather than AI, swarmed through Drekari formations with reckless abandon. They seemed to anticipate enemy movements before they occurred, outmaneuvering bioships that should have been able to predict their attack vectors. "How are they doing this?" Zurthal asked, mandibles slack with awe. "The neural predictive algorithms in Drekari vessels are supposed to be unbeatable." "Because they are insane," replied Nexlara, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Look at their attack patterns. No logical species would pilot that way. They're deliberately flying into danger zones, using their own vessels as bait." She was right. Human pilots were executing maneuvers that defied not just tactical wisdom, but basic self-preservation. They would charge directly at Drekari capital ships, drawing fire, only to veer away at the last possible microsecond, allowing larger human vessels to target the now exposed weapon systems. "They are playing with probability," I murmured. "The Drekari predict based on optimal decision-making, but the humans aren't making optimal decisions." "Unpredictability as tactical advantage," Nexlara agreed. "Terrifying." The comm system crackled again. "Commander Jiraal," Captain Blackburn called, his face now gleaming with perspiration. "We have opened a corridor to safety. Get your nursery ships through now." On the tactical display, I could see he was right. The human warships had formed a protective gauntlet, their combined firepower holding the Drekari at bay just long enough for our most vulnerable vessels to escape. "All nursery transports, proceed through the human corridor at maximum speed," I ordered. "Remaining combat-capable ships, provide additional coverage at these coordinates." As our precious cargo began their desperate sprint to safety, the human battle group's formation shifted. They were no longer just defending. They were advancing directly into the heart of the Drekari fleet. "What are they doing?" Voxtral asked. "They have accomplished their objective. The younglings are escaping. Why continue engagement?" I watched as human warships deliberately positioned themselves to draw Drekari fire away from our retreating vessels, absorbing punishment that would have vaporized Quartanian ships instantly. Their shields flared brilliant blue-white under impacts that should have shattered any defensive system. "They're not just saving us," I realized aloud. "They're making sure the Drekari can never threaten us again." On the main view screen, Captain Blackburn's face appeared once more. Blood, their strange red circulatory fluid, trickled from a wound on his forehead, yet his expression remained unchanged. "Commander, we are about to execute our main offensive. Suggest you withdraw to minimum safe distance of 3 light minutes." "Captain Blackburn," I said, struggling to find appropriate words, "your intervention has saved millions of our younglings. The collective is eternally grateful." The human's mouth twitched. "Don't thank us yet, Commander. This isn't charity, it's pest control. We have seen what the Drekari do to inhabited worlds. Can't have that happening in our backyard." With that chilling statement, the transmission ended. "All remaining Quartanian vessels, withdraw immediately," I ordered. "Maximum thrust toward coordinates 5890.32. As our depleted fleet limped away from the battle zone, the tactical display showed the human warships converging on the Drekari flagship, a massive bioship nearly 5 kilometers in length. "Magnify that sector," I commanded. The view screen zoomed in on the human vessel Ruthless as it accelerated directly toward the Drekari command ship. For a moment, I thought Captain Blackburn intended to ram the enemy in some final, suicidal gesture. Instead, the human vessel executed a maneuver that should have torn it apart, slipping between the massive energy discharges from the Drekari flagship's main cannons. The Ruthless unleashed a barrage of missiles, primitive kinetic weapons, or so I thought until they detonated. Space itself seemed to distort around the explosion points. The Drekari flagship didn't break apart or explode. It simply ceased to exist, along with everything within several thousand kilometers. What weapon was that?" whispered Zerthal, all four of his hands trembling on the sensor console. Before anyone could speculate, Voxtral called out, "Commander, I'm detecting massive energy buildup from the remaining human vessels." On the display, the human warships had arranged themselves in a precise geometric formation around the scattered Drekari fleet. Blue-white energy arced between the human vessels, building into a lattice of pure destruction. "All hands brace for shockwave," I shouted. The view screen automatically darkened as space itself erupted into a maelstrom of light and energy. When it finally cleared, nothing remained of the Drekari armada. Not debris, not radiation, nothing. Silence fell across our bridge. The species that had driven us to the edge of extinction, that had consumed 12 billion of our people, had been eliminated in less than 1 standard hour. "Communications," I said finally, my voice barely audible even to myself. "Hail the human vessels." After several attempts, Captain Blackburn's face appeared once more. The bridge behind him was bathed in red emergency lighting. Several console stations appeared damaged, and I could see other humans tending to wounded crew members. "Sorry about the delay, Commander," Blackburn said, his voice rougher than before. "Had some systems to restart after the gravitic cascade." What have you done?" I asked. "Solved your Drekari problem," he replied matter-of-factly. "Permanently. But how? Such power, such technology," the human's expression darkened. "Let's just say humanity learned long ago that the universe doesn't reward mercy to predators. When something threatens our existence, or the existence of those under our protection, we don't believe in half measures." I felt Nexlara stiffen beside me. "Are we under your protection now, Captain?" Blackburn's small eyes fixed on her with unnerving intensity. "That depends, First Officer. The United Earth Alliance is always looking for stable allies in this sector. We could offer technological exchange, defensive pacts, trade agreements, assuming your leadership is amenable." Understanding dawned with horrifying clarity. We hadn't been saved out of altruism. We've been claimed as vassals. "I will convey your offer to the Supreme Matriarch," I managed. "Excellent." Blackburn's face split into what I now recognized as a smile. The exposure of blunt teeth in what his species considered a non-threatening gesture. "In the meantime, we will escort your fleet to a secure location. There's an uninhabited system about 12 light-years from here that would make a suitable temporary refuge." As the transmission ended, my crew looked to me with expressions ranging from relief to terror. "Commander," Voxtral ventured cautiously, "what do we do now?" I stared at the empty space where, just moments ago, the most feared predator species in our known galaxy had been obliterated. "We adapt," I said quietly, "and we learn everything we can about humans." Nexlara moved closer, speaking so only I could hear. "Do you think the Supreme Matriarch will agree to their terms?" I watched the human warships, damaged but still overwhelmingly powerful, as they moved into escort formation around our battered fleet. "I think she will have no choice," I replied. "We have escaped one predator only to fall under the protection of another. Let's just hope these humans consider us more valuable as allies than as subjects." As our ship fell into formation behind the imposing bulk of the Ruthless, I couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy had just become infinitely more dangerous. Not despite human intervention, but because of it. Defeat had been certain until ruthless human soldiers arrived. And now, nothing would ever be certain again. 0.3 lunar cycles had passed since our encounter with the humans. The Cortanian refugee fleet now orbited a blue-green world in what Captain Blackburn had called neutral space, a term that carried ominous implications about territories that were decidedly not neutral. Status report, I demanded, pacing the command deck of our provisional headquarters, a retrofitted cargo vessel that now served as the seat of our governing council. The humans have established a base on the fourth moon, reported Voxtral, his voice carrying the weary tone that had become standard among our officers. They call it an advisory outpost, but the energy readings suggest significant weapons capabilities. Of course it does, I muttered. And our colonization efforts? Nexlara stepped forward, datapad in hand. 27 settlement clusters established on the northern continent. The soil composition is compatible with our agricultural needs, and the younglings are responding well to the planetary gravity. That, at least, was cause for modest relief. After generations aboard ships and space habitats, many had feared our species might have lost the ability to adapt to planetary conditions. The younglings, our future, seemed determined to prove otherwise. And what of our protectors? I asked, the words souring my mouth glands. Nexlara hesitated, her secondary eyes blinking rapidly, a sign of nervous calculation. The humans have requested a formal meeting with the Supreme Matriarch. They claim it's time to discuss long-term cooperative arrangements. Meaning tribute, I said flatly. Perhaps not, Nexlara countered. Their behavior has been puzzling. Before I could question her assessment, the communication system chimed. A human face materialized on the view screen. Not Captain Blackburn, but a female of the species with darker pigmentation and what appear to be artificial enhancements around her visual organs. Commander Jiraal, she said crisply. Commander Tess Jackson, UEA Special Diplomatic Corps. The Supreme Matriarch has agreed to host a delegation from Earth tomorrow at your primary settlement. I'm transmitting security and protocol details now. My antennae stiffened in surprise. The matriarch agreed without consulting the military council. The human's expression remained neutral. I believe her exact words were, the military council can advise when it demonstrates competence beyond retreating. But perhaps something was lost in translation. Behind me, Voxtral made a strangled clicking sound that might have been suppressed laughter. I silently vowed to have him assigned to waste reclamation duty. We will, of course, provide appropriate security, I said stiffly. Commander Jackson's mouth formed a subtle curve. No need. We will handle our own security. This is primarily a cultural exchange. Captain Blackburn thought your people might be curious about who exactly saved you from extinction. With that pointed reminder of our situation, the transmission ended. Cultural exchange, I repeated skeptically. They destroy an entire armada with technology centuries beyond ours, establish a heavily armed outpost overlooking our only settlement. And now they want a cultural exchange. Nexlara stepped closer. Commander, I have been studying the data packets they have shared with us. Their history, it's not what we expected, meaning they weren't always the dominant predators they appear to be. She activated a display showing what appeared to be evolutionary diagrams of the human species. For most of their development, they were prey animals. I stared at the display in disbelief. That can't be correct. No prey species develops such aggressive tendencies or military capabilities. That's precisely what makes them unique, she insisted. They evolved as social omnivores with limited physical defenses, constantly threatened by larger predators. Rather than developing natural weapons, they developed problem-solving intelligence and cooperative strategies. So they are pack hunters, I said dismissively. Many species follow that evolutionary path. No, you don't understand. Nexlara manipulated the display to show primitive human ancestors wielding crude tools. They weren't born apex predators. They invented their way to the top. And when something threatened their survival, they didn't adapt their bodies over generations like normal evolution. They adapted their technology overnight. A disturbing thought formed in my mind. You're suggesting their aggressive capabilities are defensive in origin. I'm suggesting, Nexlara said carefully, that we may be misinterpreting their intentions based on our own evolutionary psychology. The Cortanian evolved as solitary ambush predators before developing higher intelligence. We instinctively view relationships as dominance hierarchies, while humans view them as, I prompted, complicated, she finished. Sometimes competitive, sometimes cooperative, often both simultaneously. Their social structures are remarkably fluid. I considered this perspective as we prepared for the human delegation's arrival. Perhaps there was more to these bipedal conquerors than their terrifying military prowess suggested. The meeting location was our largest settlement dome, hastily redecorated to display what remained of Cortanian cultural artifacts. The supreme matriarch herself had emerged from seclusion, her massive form dominating the central platform, attendants fussing over her ceremonial armor. "Commander Jiraal," she acknowledged coldly as I approached. "Your decisions continue to have interesting consequences for our species." I bowed deeply. "Supreme Matriarch, had we not sought assistance, we would have died with dignity rather than living as vassals," she interrupted. "But what's done is done. Now we must determine whether these humans can be manipulated to serve our eventual resurgence." Before I could respond to this dangerously misguided assessment, the entrance portal dilated. The human delegation had arrived, 5 individuals of varying sizes and pigmentations, led by Captain Blackburn and Commander Jackson. What struck me immediately was their lack of obvious weaponry or protective gear. They wore what appeared to be formal attire rather than combat uniforms, exposing vulnerable areas that any Cortanian would have instinctively protected. Either they were supremely confident in their technological superiority, or they were making a deliberate statement about peaceful intentions. Neither possibility aligned with the Supreme Matriarch's assumptions. "Supreme Matriarch of the Cortanian Collective," Captain Blackburn began, executing a gesture that approximated our traditional greeting with surprising accuracy. "On behalf of the United Earth Alliance, we extend formal recognition of your sovereignty and offer friendship between our peoples." The matriarch's primary eyes narrowed. Curious terms from those who hold absolute power over our survival. If the human took offense, he showed no sign. "With respect, matriarch, the UEA doesn't seek dominion over other species. We have had quite enough of that in our own history." Commander Jackson stepped forward, activating a holographic display. "We have taken the liberty of analyzing your technology, agricultural needs, and defensive requirements. We are prepared to offer technological exchange in several key areas that would accelerate your recovery and self-sufficiency." The display showed detailed schematics for atmosphere processors, gravity stabilizers, and defensive systems, all significantly advanced beyond our current capabilities, yet deliberately designed to interface with existing Cortanian technology. "And what do you demand in exchange?" the matriarch asked suspiciously. "3 things," Captain Blackburn replied. "First, a mutual defense pact. The Drekari may be gone, but this galaxy contains numerous aggressive species. We are stronger together. Second," continued Commander Jackson, "exclusive mining rights to the gas giant in this system. It contains elements crucial to our propulsion technology." "And third," said Blackburn, his voice softening slightly, "cultural and scientific exchange. Your species has explored regions of space unknown to us, developed biological technologies we find fascinating, and created art forms we have never encountered. We want to learn from you as much as you from us." The Supreme Matriarch's appendages twitched with obvious skepticism. "You destroyed a Drekari armada in less than 1 hour. What could you possibly learn from a refugee species on the brink of extinction?" A new human stepped forward, older than the others, with pigmentation faded to white atop its cranium. "Perspective, matriarch. Every sentient species perceives reality differently, solves problems differently, creates differently. In our history, our greatest advances came not from conquest, but from exchange." Dr. Anastasia Petrov, Commander Jackson introduced. "Our chief xenoanthropologist. Our species nearly destroyed itself before reaching the stars." Dr. Petrov continued. "We learned the hard way that technological advancement without cultural wisdom leads to extinction. The galaxy needs the Cortanian perspective, your art, your philosophy, your unique biological sciences. Extinction of any sentient species impoverishes us all. I watched the Supreme Matriarch's posture shift subtly, the equivalent of a human raising an eyebrow. For all her flaws, our leader possessed keen intelligence and recognized sincerity when she heard it. Pretty words, she said, but I notice your mutual defense pact would place human warships permanently in our territory. Captain Blackburn nodded frankly. Yes, because the next predator species might be worse than the Drekari. Humanity learned centuries ago that peace requires visible defensive capability. Trust through strength, the matriarch mused, a concept not unfamiliar to Quartanian philosophy. What followed was 6 hours of detailed negotiation, terms, boundaries, technological specifications. Throughout, I observed the humans carefully. Their diplomatic approach revealed much about their psychology. They conceded points unnecessarily, then held firm on matters that seemed trivial. They appeared genuinely excited about cultural exchanges, yet maintained absolute secrecy around certain military technologies. Most puzzling was their insistence on establishing direct communication channels between our respective civilian populations. What strategic advantage could they gain from Quartanian civilians interacting with human merchants, artists, and educators? As the formal negotiations concluded and the delegation prepared to depart, Captain Blackburn approached me privately. Commander Jiraal, a word. I inclined my head cautiously. Of course, Captain. Your Supreme Matriarch is formidable, he said, but I suspect she doesn't fully grasp humanity's intentions here. And what might those be? I asked, carefully. Blackburn's eyes, those small, evolutionarily inadequate sensors, somehow managed to convey intensity beyond their physical limitations. Redemption, perhaps, he said quietly. Humanity's history is bloody. We fought ourselves for millennia before reaching the stars. When we finally did, we discovered something terrifying. What? I found myself genuinely curious. That we were among the most aggressive species in the galaxy. His mouth formed a grimace. Our first extraterrestrial contacts went poorly. Very poorly. We reacted with fear. They responded in kind. Entire civilizations lost before we learned better approaches. Yet you obliterated the Drekari without hesitation, I pointed out. The Drekari gave us no choice, Blackburn replied. We attempted communication 17 times. They responded by harvesting 3 human outposts. But that's exactly my point. We have become very good at identifying which species can be reasoned with and which cannot. He placed a hand briefly on my upper arm, a gesture that would have been a deadly insult among Quartanians, but which I now recognized as a human expression of connection. Your people can be reasoned with, Commander. You are not the Drekari, and neither are we, not anymore. We have learned that building allies serves us better than creating subjects. With that cryptic statement, he rejoined his delegation. 3 days later, the first human civilian vessels arrived, merchants, scientists, and cultural attaches. To my surprise, the Supreme Matriarch encouraged interaction between our peoples, even assigning Nexlara as official liaison to the human contingent. You trust them? I asked her privately after the third such delegation arrived. Not entirely, she admitted, but I have been studying their communication patterns. Their deception indicators differ from ours, but they are still detectable. When Captain Blackburn speaks of alliance rather than subjugation, his physiological responses suggest sincerity. Unless they are advanced enough to control such responses, I countered. Perhaps, Nexlara conceded. But consider the evidence. They have shared agricultural technology that's already doubled our food production. Their medical exchanges have reduced youngling mortality by 60%. Yet they have withheld planet-killing weapons and faster-than-light communication technology. Precisely, I hissed. They keep us dependent while limiting our capabilities. Or, she suggested, they are being prudent while building trust. Commander, I have studied the data packets they provided on human history. They nearly annihilated themselves in 3 separate conflicts before developing interstellar travel. They understand the dangers of advanced technology without ethical frameworks. I wanted to dismiss her reasoning, yet something prevented me. Perhaps it was the memory of those human vessels deliberately placing themselves between Drekari weapons and our youngling transports. Calculated strategy for long-term manipulation? Possibly, but unnecessarily risky if domination was their only goal. Over the following months, the human presence on our new homeworld expanded, but not in ways I had anticipated. Rather than military installations, they established trade outposts, research facilities, and cultural centers. Human medical specialists worked alongside Cortanian biologists, developing treatments for adaptation sickness among our younglings. Engineers from both species collaborated on atmosphere processors that incorporated elements of our biological technology with their mechanical expertise. Most surprisingly, humans seemed genuinely fascinated by Cortanian artistic traditions. Our crystalline sound sculptures, once considered worthless compared to military technology, became highly valued trade items. Human linguists spent hours learning our multiple-tone speech patterns, while their musicians attempted to incorporate our harmonic frequencies into their own peculiar sound arrangements. 0.6 standard cycles after our initial encounter, I found myself aboard the human diplomatic vessel Concordia, attending what they called a cultural gala. The Supreme Matriarch had appointed me as military attaché to the human fleet, a position that was either a promotion or exile, depending on one's perspective. Commander Jiraal, Captain Blackburn greeted me, now wearing the insignia of Admiral. How goes the integration of our defensive systems with your fleet? Proceeding on schedule, I replied. Though your engineers continue to express concern about our biological interfaces corrupting your digital systems. Blackburn made his characteristic barking laugh sound. They will adapt. That's what humans do best. Indeed, I gestured toward the view screen showing our new homeworld below. Your species has demonstrated remarkable adaptability, almost as if you had experience with refugee resettlement. Something flickered across his face, a micro-expression I had learned to recognize as momentary vulnerability. We do, he admitted. Before achieving unified government, human nations experienced numerous refugee crises. Millions displaced by war, climate change, political instability. We didn't always handle it well. Hence your insistence on proper resource allocation and cultural preservation for our people, I surmised. Learning from past mistakes is another human specialty, he said with a wry expression, almost as much as making new ones. Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Petrov, accompanied by a Cortanian I recognized as Jiraal, one of our few surviving cultural preservationists. Admiral Commander Dr. Petrov said excitedly, "You must see this. Jiraal has been working with human musicians to create a hybrid composition reflecting both our species' experiences of war and survival." We were ushered into what humans called a performance space, a chamber designed to enhance sound propagation. What followed was unlike anything I had experienced. Human instruments produced vibrations that should have been discordant with Cortanian resonance crystals, yet somehow formed harmonics that triggered emotional responses in both species simultaneously. The composition told a story without words. The Cortanian exodus, the desperate flight from the Drekari, the unexpected human intervention, and finally, the uncertain rebuilding of our civilization alongside these strange bipedal allies. I found my primary hearts beating in rhythm with the crescendos as the piece reached its conclusion. Not a triumphant resolution, but a questioning, open-ended progression suggesting an unwritten future. When it ended, both humans and Cortanians remained silent for several moments. I noticed moisture leaking from Admiral Blackburn's visual organs, a physiological response I had learned indicated intense emotional activation rather than injury. That, he said finally, is why we fight. For music, I asked, genuinely puzzled. For this, he gestured around the chamber where members of both species mingled. For the moments when different intelligences create something neither could imagine alone. For the possibility of becoming more together than we could ever be separately. Later, as the gathering dispersed, I found myself on an observation deck with Nexlara, watching shuttles travel between orbit and the surface. The Supreme Matriarch has approved the Joint Defense Initiative, she informed me. Quartanian biological technology integrated with human mechanical systems. The first vessels begin construction next cycle. A significant commitment, I noted, one that binds our species together for generations. Does that concern you? She asked that I consider the question carefully. 3 cycles ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. Now, I'm less certain. What changed? I have been studying human history, I admitted, specifically their conflicts with other species. In every case where they responded with overwhelming force, the target species had demonstrated one specific behavior pattern: harvesting other sentients. Nexlara guessed that I nodded. The humans have an unusually strong aversion to predation on conscious beings. They react to it with immediate, coordinated aggression beyond rational strategic calculation. An evolutionary response from their history as prey, she suggested. Perhaps. But here's what's truly interesting. Once they eliminate the threat, they consistently attempt reconciliation with the surviving population. They have repeatedly integrated former enemies into their alliance structure. Nexlara's antennae twitched thoughtfully. They are building a coalition of prey species against predators. Not exactly, I countered. They don't distinguish based on evolutionary history, but on behavior. They have allied with carnivorous species that hunt non-sentient prey. The distinction they make is ethical, not biological. Outside the viewport, a massive human vessel was departing orbit, the Indomitable, one of the warships that had decimated the Drekari fleet. Its destination was reportedly a distant sector where another aggressive species was expanding rapidly. Do you believe they will succeed? Nexlara asked, following my gaze. Creating a galactic order based on protection rather than dominance? I don't know, I admitted, but I have come to understand something about humans that I initially missed. What's that? They are terrified, I said simply. Not of us, not even of the Drekari. They are terrified of themselves, of what they are capable of becoming. Every alliance they build, every cultural exchange they establish, every protection they offer, it's as much to bind themselves to ethical constraints as it is to secure strategic advantage. Nexlara considered this. A predator species that fears its own predatory nature. Precisely. They need us to remind them of what they are fighting for, just as we need them for protection while we rebuild. A notification chimed on my communication device. New orders from the Supreme Matriarch. I was being assigned as commander of the first joint Quartanian human defensive vessel, scheduled for completion within the cycle. It seems, I said, displaying the message to Nexlara, that our future is now inextricably linked with humanity's. For better or worse, she agreed. I turned back to the viewport, watching as the human warship activated its exotic propulsion system and vanished into the darkness between stars, heading toward another conflict, another species that would learn the same lesson as the Drekari. They are not the saviors we would have chosen, I said quietly, but perhaps they're the allies we needed. Nexlara's mandibles clicked in what I had come to recognize as her version of wry amusement. Defeat was certain until ruthless human soldiers arrived. And now, I contemplated our new homeworld below, where Quartanian younglings were growing up alongside human children in shared educational facilities, where our biological technology was merging with their mechanical ingenuity to create innovations neither species could have developed alone. Now, I replied, victory is equally uncertain, but at least we are still here to face the challenge. As if punctuating my statement, a brilliant light appeared on the planet's surface, the first test activation of a hybrid power core designed by joint teams of human and Quartanian engineers. Its radiance spread across the night side of the world, a luminous symbol of what disparate species could accomplish together. Whether the humans' grand experiment in galactic cooperation would ultimately succeed remained to be seen. But watching that light expand across our new home, I felt something I had not experienced since before the Drekari invasion. Hope. Not the desperate hope of prey evading predators for one more day, but the measured optimism of equals facing an uncertain future with complementary strengths. The humans had their flaws, their aggression, their technological recklessness, their strange obsession with proving themselves worthy of survival. But they had chosen to be protectors rather than conquerors. And in doing so, perhaps they were protecting themselves as much as us from the darker instincts that lurked within their evolutionary heritage. The supreme matriarch had been wrong. We weren't vassals. We were participants in humanity's greatest experiment, creating a galactic community where cooperation yielded greater benefits than predation. Defeat had indeed been certain, until ruthless human soldiers arrived. But what they offered wasn't merely survival. It was the chance to become something entirely new, something neither of our species could become alone. The future remained unwritten. But for the first time since the Drekari appeared in our home system, it was a future worth imagining.